Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 live stream for the Valspar Championship. Considering heading out there myself because we've got some people out there in contention. 2 of our core plays up there in the top 5. On top of that, outrights at 50 to 1, 25 to 1 that I'm hoping can come through out there tomorrow. In DFS lineups that I thought were dead after my low 6 of 6 rate, but with all the core plays up there in contention, we actually have a few cashes and a few single entries that'll probably carry my week. So definitely have a little bit of a Sunday sweat on our hands. Hopefully everyone had themselves a solid moving day and is ready to go out there and tackle Sunday slate. They've got Oaks down there already, Odell River, I should say, who's asking about the young outright. I still have that. He's the 25 to 1 outright that I've got. But we also have Keith Mitchell at 50 to 1, who's winning the golf tournament. So hopefully one of those 2 can come through. But welcome on in wherever you guys are at. I've got a little Crown and Coke in the cup and ready to hop on into this. As you guys are hopping into the live stream, whether you're here live already, topping in a little bit late, or watching this on replay, go ahead and let me know your number 1 sweat for Sunday. What player is really going to break or make your week out there? And for me, that is undoubtedly Cam Young. So hopefully you can go out there and have some Sunday run good, but definitely curious to hear who those guys are. I'm sure a lot of people are sweating, guys like a Cam Young like me, right? Keith Mitchell, of course, who was a core play here on the channel, but I'd say Adam Hadman, probably sleeper. If he had a good day, I'd be really happy about it. Svenny, right? I'm sweating that top 20 bet that we talked about. It would be really nice if he went out there and had himself a week. Cameron Champ, too. I'm low-key sweating a little bit. Lucas Glover, Thomas Dietrich are a few guys further down the board that I'm kind of hoping to have a big day. But yeah, for me, no doubt, like the number 1 is Cam Young. If he goes out there, he were to somehow win the golf tournament, that'd be huge for the outright. But also most of them, not all my big single entries have Cam Young, but a good portion of them do. So that's my number 1 sweat for sure. Go ahead and let me know down in chat. But in terms of the golf course today, it played pretty much just as expected, right? Slightly over par, which comparatively over the first 3 days was right where we had the scoring average. And you had some moving day pins. You definitely had a few holes that were set up for birdies. Not so many super difficult pin locations, but with the long rough out there, some wind out there for Saturday, you saw quite a few bogeys made as well. So a slightly over par scoring average. We'll talk about the specifics when it comes to the actual stat averages when we get to the prop side later on. But you can see 3.4 bogeys made per round, only 3.35 birdies made per round. So still over the 3 mark, right, that we were mentioning last night. But even with an easy setup when it came to the pin locations, this golf course is going to hold up quite well. So when we take a look at the weather for Sunday, you'll see that it's pretty consistent with what we had for today. You have 12 to 15 miles an hour of sustained winds. Your wind gusts are there in that 20 to 25 mile an hour range for most of the day. So kind of like what we had for today where it played slightly over par, I would expect to see almost an identical sort of metric. So the one main difference will be pin locations, which I've already gone through, are slightly harder out there for Sunday. And then the greens, I do think will firm out a little bit as that water that came overnight starts to evaporate a little bit. So if anything, I think slightly harder scoring average out there for Sunday. So that'll be a lot more important when we talk about props towards the end of this live stream. But when we're looking at it from the Showdown perspective, fantasy, going out there and just trying to calculate projections for Sunday, I don't know if we're going to have a huge weather edge. Now, we do have 2 sums off of hole number 1, which is a huge, I would say, surprise out there for Sunday. I thought that they would cop out, go out there in 3 sums off of 1 in hole number 10. But luckily, the PGA Tour is starting them out there early tomorrow and off of all hole number 1. So it's going to be better from the viewing perspective. It's going to spread out a lot of that golf. And if I do decide to head over there to Tampa for tomorrow, it does give me a good amount of time to get there to the golf course. So I'm not going to wake up at like 4 a.m. and get there at 9. That's just not my style at all when it comes to going to golf tournaments. If I leave around like 7, 8 a.m., I can get there before, the last 2-3 hours of tee time. So it, gives us a little bit of an opportunity, right, to go out there and find a weather edge. But with the winds kicking up by the time we get to like 9, maybe 9:30 a.m. local time, I'm not sure we're going to see that. And actually, I think with the scoring average, something worth noting is I think that the PM wave is probably going to have an easier scoring average when we go out here and check the averages tomorrow afternoon. But it's not so much from the scoring conditions perspective, right? I think the scoring conditions will be slightly easier for the AM guys. Slightly lower winds, right, are part of the reason why there, but also more receptive greens, also more pristine greens without all the trampling on them throughout the day. So in the morning, they will have, the nuts conditions per se, but I do think the PM wave will play quote unquote easier just because they're playing better, right? They're the guys in form. They're the guys that are actually in contention this week. In general, almost all of your top end players, right, are up there towards the middle half, the top end of the board. And that's going to be a bigger factor for tomorrow than I think you see with the slight change in weather conditions. So it's a Sunday showdown slate where we already kind of have to focus on the top of the board to begin with because of all the placement points in play. But because the weather's pretty flat, it probably even more adds even more to that kind of sentiment. So it's not going to be the kind of slate where you just only go out there and take morning guys. But at the same time, as you'll see with my player poll, it doesn't mean we're only taking guys up there towards the lead. So we'll be mixing in, right, some earlier to maybe mid-morning tee times to first off get some leverage, right, try and take some lower owned plays for our DFS lineups, but also try and get some of the, even if it's only a slight little edge, right? Those guys in the morning have a little bit of softer greens. That adds up, right? When you're out there building, 150 lineups, when you're playing, 30, 40 players in a player pool, you're going to get 5, maybe 6 guys that are going off early that shoot something like maybe 4 or 5 under par tomorrow, 3, 4 under par, right? Very realistically, you're going to see a good amount of players get to. That's the kind of player that you're going to need for your DFS lineups. So we're going to talk about placement points, right? We're going to talk about lineup construction a whole lot when we go through the player pool here. But from the weather perspective, it's not quite the slate that some people out there would be hoping for, right? A lot of times when we're playing Showdown, right, weather can be some of the bigger, some of the biggest edges that we can find when it comes to this format. It's just that the setup for tomorrow doesn't really lend itself towards that. So that's all we got for the weather. Golf course, again, we'll circle back on a little bit later on when we're talking through some of the prop stuff. But in terms of a Showdown strategy, I don't think it's going to have a massive impact out there from what we're working with. Let me bring up the Showdown stuff. We have a comment about Xander. Mav and Cole could make a top 10 run. Yeah, those would be sweet for me too. I don't have Xander myself, so I'm not with you there, but Mav, Eric Cole for sure would be nice to see there getting into the top 10, as long as they don't knock Mitchell and Svenny out, right? I'm going out there. I'm sweating those bets for my top 10. I feel you, though, on Eric Cole for sure. That eagle was pretty sweet today, too, right, Steven? Going out there, getting those points. We had a whole-out eagle in our player pool for 3 players in Showdown. Keith Mitchell got one. Cam Young, of course, got one. And then good old Eric Cole, right? I know he didn't have the best score today. I think he shot like even par. But he had like 4 birdies and an eagle. So from the fantasy perspective, not so much from like the leaderboard perspective, but in fantasy points, Eric Cole actually had one of the better days of anyone in the field. So I got to say, I love that for Eric Cole. Love my main slate lineups. Love it too, honestly. Not just I'm out there for Showdown, but can't complain there either. Let's talk through this strategy a little bit, right? What I'm going to be looking at out here for Sunday. And it's a mix, right? I already said that you can't just only take guys going out early. You certainly can't only take guys that are going out late, or else you're just going to be playing all the chalk. The key when you're building lineups for tomorrow is going to be to mixing in, different types of players. So when you're building lineups, right, you'll want guys like Xander, right, at 18%. You'll want guys down here like a Taylor Moore at 9% and Adam Schenk. But your lineup shouldn't start like Xander, Taylor Moore, Shank, right? Another loaned guy up here like a Doug Gim as your top 4 players, right? It should maybe be like a Xander and then a Keith Mitchell, right? Somebody up top that you think might hold their leaderboard position. Then you mix in somebody like a Taylor Moore and maybe an Adam Schenk for ownership leverage. But in your top end lineups, you're going to need 3 of the top 5 to take down the big GPP. So when you're building lineups out there for Sunday, you probably want at least 3 pieces of chalk in every single lineup. So I'm not going to have necessarily like a roll set to go out there and only play these top end players, but because their fantasy projections are so much higher than their peers, I'm by default, right, going to get a lot of these players that are -7, -10, -4 or better in my player pool. So it's more so like the low-owned pivots that I'm worrying about. Now, Xander's fantasy projection is through the roof because he is by far the best player in this field. But when I'm getting to players like a Taylor Moore and Adam Schenk, I'm going to have to manually force them into lineups, right? Their projections are going to be a little bit lower than the chalky guys around them. Like, for example, Peter Malnati, right? A Seamus Power there at -8, who are also 2, sometimes 3 times the ownership number. So for me, right, if you're going to take chalk for Sunday Showdown, really for any sort of DFS format, I'm usually much more comfortable doing it with my 9 and 10K plays. And when it's a Sunday Showdown slate, that's even more so the case. So, the ownership, the chalk is always going to be behind the guys at the top of the leaderboard, and it's extremely predictable as a result. So guys like Adam Svensson, right, get a big bump because of his position at -6, but guys like Malinati, right, Seamus Power, get massive bumps when it comes to their ownership. You can say the same thing about Chandler Phillips, Kevin Roy, right, are like 4 or 5 times higher owned than the otherwise would be. Guys like Cameron Champ at -6, Lee Hodges, Joseph Bramlett, all there at -5 or better, are 3, 4 times higher owned than their peers. And you just can't play all of them in your lineups right now. There are plenty of those players that I am using, especially like some of the guys up there in the higher end of the 7s or up there in the 8 and 9K range. But when you get down here into the 6s, like almost all of this chalk is egregious and almost all of it is worth fading, in my opinion. Now, I think there's like 2 players that I consider chalky value plays that I'm taking in my player pool, but a majority of my ownership pivots, right, are going to come down here in that 6 and 7K range. So if there is a piece of chalk down here that's cheap that you really like, you could certainly make it work in your lineups, but your value plays for all of your builds tomorrow, right, shouldn't be a player pool of like Roy, Bramlett, Hodges, and Cameron Champ, right? Like you shouldn't have those 4 as like all your value plays down low, unless you're truly going to commit to playing them, right? Unless you're truly okay with playing like 35, 40% of these sort of players, then don't do it, right? So if you're gonna, go out there, take a chalky player down low, just know that their ownership is not going to be the 4 or 5% that you normally see, right? Normally, Kevin Roy, you get it like 3% ownership, right? Chandler Phillips, you normally get it like 4% ownership at the very most. Now, if you're going to take them, you're getting them at a premium, sure, with prime leaderboard position, but at the same time, they still have to go out there and produce to get there, right? They still have to shoot something like 3 under par to make the optimal lineup. So just them going out there and getting those top 10 placement points is not going to be enough, right, to get to the optimal lineup. So if you're playing in cash, I would make these players a much bigger priority, right? In fact, guys like a Chandler Phillips, Cameron Champ, right? These players that are starting in the top 10 would be guys that almost for sure be getting to in that kind of format. It's just that when you're playing GPP single entries, even just like smaller field, top heavy kind of payout contest, which is a majority of Draftkings, right? If you're not playing like a 50-50 double up, you're playing in that kind of contest where you have to finish in the top 5, top 1% to go out there and really get the payout. That's a completely different outcome that we're looking for than in cash, right? Where those placement points really matter. So that's the main thing I'll tell you about this slate, right? Like we'll talk through a few plays here in a minute that I think are decent pivots to get to. But what's far more important than who you're playing tomorrow is how you're playing them, right? Going out there, getting a good mix of those placement points along with guys that are going to come along as chasers. And that's what I'll leave you at for the Showdown format. So Cam Young, Keith Mitchell, right? I'm just playing them because of their leaderboard position. They still have to go out there and produce to get there, but there's a reason why they're like 40, 45% owned. So I'm not going to be locking them by any means. These are going to be the kind of plays that I just have marginal leverage to the field on. What is much more interesting in my player pool, right, are the Xanders, like I mentioned before, this Taylor Moore, the Adam Shanks, who, they've had very good performances at this event before. So why not take them for a Sunday resurgence, right? Adam Hadwin would be a little bit more of a chalky play that I'm getting to. But once again, I'm taking him because he's playing solid golf and he has a good track record around this golf course. So, the more unproven players that maybe don't have that track record here, or maybe guys that just, are doing it unsustainably with the ball striking, are players that I have my second thoughts about playing, right? So like a Mackenzie Hughes, for example, he's gaining all of his strokes with the putter. In fact, he's number 1 in the field by like 4 strokes with his shots gained putting. That doesn't feel like something that feels all that sustainable out there for Sunday. So I'm looking more for ball striking guys over the first 3 rounds, especially if I'm going to take somebody as chalk. And then that track record is a nice little bonus to add. So that's the case with those 3 players. Down here towards the bottom, KH Lee has been really ball striking it well for the last few weeks. Certainly out here at the Valspar, so 7,400. Ownership is not out of hand, right? Compared to guys like a Chandler Phillips, a Kevin Rory, right? He's about half the ownership of both of those players and is only like 1-2 shots behind, right? So, all of these guys are going to have to go out there, have a decent round to make it to the optimal lineup. You're telling me we're getting KH at half the ownership and he's right there when it comes to the leaderboard. Like, that's a spot that I want to get to. So I prefer, these like 5, 6, maybe 8, 9% owned players much more than the guys that are nearly 20%. So even a Ryan Moore, I don't think that's a horrible ownership number. Like a Joseph Bramlett, I don't think it's a horrible ownership number either. And then guys like a Matty Schmid, a Matt Wallace down here, like Schmid's 9.9%. You have guys like Matt Wallace at 8% ownership. Like those are good spots to get over the field on, right? Like you don't have to break the bank to go out there and get exposure. And I know they're not guys I have on here as highlighted plays, but they are guys that I'm getting well over the field on. And it's just an easy spot to get leverage to, right? If they have a good round, like 3-4 under par, they could very easily end up in the top 5, at least like top 10, right? By the end of the golf tournament. And then they get the 3-4 under par round on top of that. Like that's for sure, right? Going to be one of your top 6 fantasy scores. So they still have to do it, right? They still have to go out there and put up that performance, but at least you're not taking them in 40% of your lineups, right? You can take 2-3 of those players at like 15% rather than going for, the Chandler Phillips, for example, at -7, who you have to play in 40% to get that leverage to. So that's the idea with Sunday Showdown is, you have to mix in, guys that have those placement point potential, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be the top 5, top 10 that you're just locking in, right? Maybe it is that top 10 to top 20, that range between 10 to 20, that's a little bit better, as opposed to the guys that are going to be mega chalk up top. Jorge Campillo at 6,600, right? He's -3. He's within striking distance. As another example of one of the guys I think could pop. And then, Semi Valimaki, I'm not sure if he mentioned him there yet at $7,000, but, obviously has played really well to start 2024. Is one of those Euro Tour guys that's really been standout over the last month or so. And I know, right, -2 is not a sexy starting score, but if he shoots -3, -4, that's a top 20 or at least like a top 25 right there. And he's only 3.2% owned. So there are some chalky guys that I still like Cameron Champ, for example. I don't think it's a horrible play at all, right, out there for Sunday. But guys like Valimaki are really useful to use, especially if you're starting with like a Cam Young, a Keith Mitchell, right? If you're going to start with like 2 pieces of mega chalk, maybe it is a Cam Young and then like an Adam Hadman as your second man in a little bit more of a balanced lineup. You still need these guys that are going to give you that leverage. And, whether it's one of these 8K guys, right, that's only like 8-9% owned as opposed to 20, or somebody like a Valimaki who's only 3.2% down here in the lower end of the 7s, there are a time and place to get to these guys to get different. So that's what I'll say about the player pool. Outside of that, I guess just a few chalky guys to keep an eye on, right? I guess I like Svensson for tomorrow, right? I mentioned I'm going to be playing him in some lineups, but he is coming in at 18%. So he would be a prime fade candidate. Same thing with Molinari and Power, right? They're prime fade candidates at that kind of ownership. Bazane Hoot, surprisingly high ownership at 22%. A lot of that because of his price tag there, $9,500. Unless you really like somebody up here in the 9K range, they're probably not the best spot to get to, right? The ownership's not out of hands with these sort of players. The issue is the price tag, right? Like even 9,300 for Eric Cole's a little bit steep, but 9,500 is certainly steep for Seabez. Brendan Todd at $9,200. I know he's starting there at -7. But because we had all of those missed cuts, right, up there at the top, it impacted pricing and ownership a ton, right, out there for round 3. Now you have a lot of guys that are way overpriced, considering the type of utility that they bring. So I don't really know how that's going to impact the slate other than that these guys are probably going to be lower owned than most 9K guys would be, but they're also way too expensive. So I don't love playing them in GPPs. In fact, Lucas Glover is probably my favorite player in that range in terms of my GPP exposure. But you're definitely paying a little bit much right there. And personally, I would not have a ton of exposure to these guys down here in the 9K range. They're just, I would maybe pick like 1-2, like I said, to go out there and get that leverage to. But these guys up here that are first off just better players, in the case of Cam Young, Mitchell, and even Xander at -2, they still have that leaderboard potential, right, to go out there and get placement points. Like they're just better plays, right? Like you find the $500 to spend, right, to get a Cam Young from a Seabez, right? Like find the extra $1,500, right, to go up there to a Xander Schauffele. if you're gonna try and save some salary, right, just go down here to the 8K range, right? Like take an Adam Hadwin, take a Mackenzie Hughes. I'd even be more okay with, right, than some of the guys here in the 9K range. These sort of players like are 8K golfers, right? And the only reason they're in the 9K range out here for round 4 is because of the fact that you had all those missed cuts. Let's see, any questions? Mitchell has been playing good for a while. I think we'll hold on. I could totally see it, and I'd be totally okay with it too. But more so, just hope that he has a decent round, right? He had a round 4 at this event in the past where he lost 8 strokes putting. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. Your research has been so helpful this week. A lot of names you don't often see in contention. You do know Champ can really climb when he has a chance to win. The research this week, I have to say, modeling all of the projections in general have been super helpful. And I've just been trusting the numbers this week, right? So obviously appreciate the shout out there. You going out there giving me those props. But it really just comes down to trusting the process, right? And I'd say at top tier events, right, when it's all the top tier players, those sort of guys are going to eat. But at these weaker field events, and it's not a weak event by any means, right? It's still got a pretty decent field. It's even more useful because then you can find those diamonds in the rough. So yeah, Svenny is probably the one I'm the most proud of this week. But let's keep it rolling. Who is the one guy I'm playing in a single entry? Who do I think is going to win? Well, I guess it's a good time to go over that. But I don't know who it is. Normally I have a pretty good lean for that, and honestly, everything tells me, and this is a complete gut feeling, okay? I don't really have that much data to back this up, which scares me, right? I'm a data guy at heart, so I hate to say that, but it's true. But everything in my gut tells me that Adam Hadwin is going to make a move tomorrow, that he's going to be one of the better showdown plays that you can get to. I have a hard time feeling that he's going to win this event, right? Starting 4 shots back, but I would be mind blown if he went out there and just like pulled a JT, right? Went out there, blew up, ended up completely out of contention. Hadwin has played this course too much. He knows this course too well to go out there and I think make those kind of mistakes. Now, I'm going to knock on wood now that I said that, because that's the biggest jinx in human history. But it's probably Adam Hadwin. Now, he's not super low owned, right? So, single entries, DFS, right? He is going to be a little bit chalky, but it feels like, people are going to play Hughes, right? I have Hughes at slightly higher ownership. Brendan Todd's going to take away enough attention. Obviously, this 9-10K range is always going to get its exposure. Like 25% actually feels a little bit low out there for Adam Hadwin. So it would probably be Hadwin for me. In terms of a guy who I think is going to win the golf tournament, so I liked the case for Keith Mitchell. I mean, his ball striking, he's gained 13 strokes ball striking this week. It's Scotty Scheffler like stuff, right? Like he's doing stuff to this field that you don't see very often. It would be kind of hard to bet against Keith Mitchell because of that. Obviously, the hole out helps that, but he still gained like 5 strokes ball striking outside of that last iron shot that he hit. And I don't want to say Cam Young because he's an obvious choice, right? I'm starting there 3 shots back. If I'm going to give you a dark horse to win the event, Adam Hadwin's not a bad choice. Again, everything in my gut is telling me that he's just, and again, my gut could be full of shit. It has been full of shit a lot of times before. Just look at Jordan Spieth this week, right? I had a good feeling that he was going to have a good week, and look how that turned out. But I guess it is Adam Hadwin. I hate to say that, but it's just so true. The course history matters on Sunday, right? So like days 1 through 3, you're going to see some wild shit happen, right? But when they get to like the Sunday pins, which when we go through props, we're going to go through pins. There are some just nasty pins out there for tomorrow, just like downright pins that you cannot shoot at. Adam Hadwin knows that, right? Like in fact, when he won this event, he had a pretty good Sunday performance to go out there and win the event. He knows where to take his chances tomorrow, right? And I think that really matters. Like somebody like, the younger players, like Cam Young, it's his first time ever playing here. I could see it going sideways for him, right? Like Keith Mitchell has not had a really good track record at this golf course. In fact, Sunday at this event is where he lost 8 strokes putting, right, out there at the Valspar Championship. Like, I don't worry about that with Hadwin. That's why I think he's such a good play for tomorrow. And I think that's why my gut's telling me that he's the best play out there for Sunday, is because I don't have any of those concerns. Like Adam Hadwin's a very intelligent player, very intelligent guy, knows how to, take apart a golf course and where his strengths and weaknesses are. And the pin locations for tomorrow, he's seen every single one before. So I don't know. That's the answer. It's Adam Hadwin, that's for sure. All right, let's hop over to some lineup construction real quickly, and then we'll talk some props and then hop on out of here. So, in terms of lineup construction, we've already talked a lot about it, so I don't want to spend too much time here. But when you're building lineups, right, you almost want to like alternate between chalk up top that you're taking and then chasers that you can go ahead and mix in. So to show you that, right, let's start with a chalky piece. Let's go ahead and throw Cam Young in. Now let's go and try and find a chaser. So whether we start at the top of the board or maybe just dip down to try and find a chaser, let's go ahead and find somebody for leverage. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just throw Andrew Novak into this lineup, who I know we didn't talk about very much, is a chaser that I like, just playing really good golf over the last month. And I believe I had it like 1.5% ownership. So literally not getting any attention out there for Sunday. So we started with a chalky piece, went to a chaser. Our next man in will be somebody that's a little bit more chalky. So let's go ahead and take Adam Hadwin in this kind of lineup. I told you guys I absolutely love him for tomorrow, which it's going to go sideways now, but we'll see. I'm definitely committing to it. And then we're going to go ahead and take a chaser. So we're going to try and find somebody a little bit lower owned. I told you guys, I think Matt Wallace at like 7-8% ownership was a chaser that I'd like taking. So we'll go ahead and throw him in there. Let's go ahead and find another piece of chalk to mix in. So for this one, I think like Svensson would make quite a bit of sense. And now we're at, $8,600 remaining. You can go out there, find the last man in to take. I would probably be a little bit more aggressive with my fifth man in, honestly. So let's go ahead and just throw in like a Brendan Todd, right? Another relatively chalky player. And now if you're last man in, right, you don't take a Seamus Power, right? You don't go out there and you take another piece of chalk, right? That would be 4 pieces of chalk in the same lineup. What you'd want to avoid for your last man in, right, are the guys like Seamus Power, right? I preferred taking like a Shank, right? A Thomas Dietrich, Batia, if you really want to get different out there in your last spot. And this lineup would be totally fine, right? You have 3 guys that are going to be like 20% plus owned. One of them is like 40% like a Cam Young. Hadman might even be like 30% himself. But because you have the Novak, the Wallace, and then, your last man in here, that's going to get you a little bit different, I'd be totally fine in the large field GPP. So I think some people for Sunday Showdown overcomplicate things, right? They'll go with pivots in like 4 or maybe even 5 of your lineup spots. Realistically, you only need like 3 of them, right, out there for your lineup. So, and that's for the largest field GPPs. If you're playing in like a large field single entry, so maybe you only need like 2 pivots out there in that lineup. So that's what I would say for the large field GPP. If I was playing in cash, I would for sure start with Keith Mitchell, and I would play a very balanced build. So in cash, I would start like this. And it'd be these like exact 4 players. Now, maybe you only take 3, right, to get your average salary up a little bit. So maybe you go down here and you take like a Brendan Todd out. But like of these 4 players, I'd be starting with at least 3 of them in my cash lineup. So I care a lot more about placement points, right, when it comes to the cash perspective. And I also care about, not spending all my salary on one player, right? So, while Cam Young, Xander Schauffele, I think are okay plays for cash, they're just a little bit too expensive for my liking. So again, I would probably start with at least 3 of these. I would automatically have Keith Mitchell for tomorrow. He'd be a lock out there for my cash lineups. And it's not like I think he's a lock to top 3. He's not. He can have that horrible day. He's not immune to doing that. It's the ownership that you want to lock in for cash, which is actually advantageous to have at a higher number for your cash lineup. And on top of that, the ball striking, right? He's gained 13 strokes ball striking. Tee to green over the first 3 rounds. And that's the most sustainable part of golf. So if we're looking for guys to sustain that success from day to day, Keith Mitchell has by far the best opportunity to do that. So that's what I'd be doing for cash. I am not playing cash for tomorrow. I think people that play cash for Showdown Golf are a little bit of psychopaths, but I know we have a few psychos that are watching this live stream, so I don't want to leave that completely out of there. You have 24 Rainmaker Showdown cards. Okay, so I don't play Rainmakers myself, but I'll entertain the question. If I have one more card, I can make 5 full lineups. So what card should you buy on the secondary market? So I don't know the prices. It's a hard question for me to answer, right? I'll just say that much. It's not like I hate the question at all. If I had the answer, I would definitely give it to you. I mean, realistically, I'm just going to make some assumptions, right, about the Rainmakers, because again, I don't have the experience with it. You want somebody that's like a 7K golfer that isn't super chalky, right? So like, I'm sure the market, right, goes up on guys right before the Showdown slates that are going to be a little bit more popular. But like maybe you find like a Michael Kim, right? Like Michael Kim's like -4. You're using him in a Sunday Showdown. You can get some placement points, I'd imagine, right? If he goes out there and has a good day. And I don't think he's going to be super expensive. A Ben Griffin, for example, I think would make sense. If Chandler Phillips isn't more expensive now, then, I guess you could go out there and even take that sort of player, like a Seamus Power, even. Like, I'm not sure many people even have those cards on hand to go out there and use. It depends on the pricing, right? It depends on all of that. So that's what I'll say. I don't have a lot of experience there, unfortunately. You called Scotty comeback last week, so maybe your gut play applies to round 4. And that's what I did with Scotty, right? I told you guys, it was like the all-time gut feeling. I was like, he slapped the ball around and shot -4 for round 3. Oh, good times there with Scotty last week. But it is the same thing with Harman, dude. I have that same sort of feeling. And honestly, you reminded me. We're bringing up Hard Rock Bet. And I think we're going to bet Adam Hadman to win, because I'm sure the odds are pretty decent. He can't have very good odds to win, right? He's what, 4 shots back. He doesn't have the most firepower on tour. He's a little bit of a boring golfer. Like, I get it, right? He's 20-1. I don't know if that's good enough. Let me check out Draftkings and FanDuel. I'm gonna see where they have him, right? If he's decent value on Hard Rock Bet, I can be swayed into taking him. So he's 18-1 on DraftKings. Oh boy, maybe he is at a good number. If FanDuel has him at 20-1 or worse, I'll bet it. That was the rule with Scotty last week, right? I only bet him if the value was there, and it was decent value that we were getting over there. Hadwin is 20-1 on FanDuel. Oh boy, they're gonna make us do it. So you know what? Let me go ahead and sign into my Hard Rock real quick, and we'll place the bet on live stream. Fuck it. Why not? It worked last week, that was for sure, wasn't it? And I guess if I have this kind of lean, this kind of gut feeling, I probably want to bet it, because if I don't bet it and he wins, I'm going to be pissed off as hell. That's for sure. The FOMO would be real at that point. All right. Sorry that you're just looking at my face right now, guys. I'm signing into Hard Rock Bet. Don't need you guys to see my login info, which I'm sure you'd like to see. Let's talk through this. So Adam Hadwin, I will put $100 on it. Fuck it. Why not? Go with a full unit bet on him to win $2,100. All right. That's probably lighting money on fire. Again, I prefaced it with that, but that's what we're doing. Depends on your lineup. 8 game, you're probably just down to the worst cards for that lineup. Yeah, probably. Phillips plus 5,600 to win is your sweat. That's a heck of a bet, Clint. Nice. That's a good one. Yeah, and Michael Kim it is. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it, right? Because he's going to be cheap and he's in position. Again, I was making a lot of assumptions when it came to playing Rainmakers, but that's the way that I would handle it. I've played similar formats, and I know it's not the same. Like I played Ultimate Team for things like Madden and FIFA, and I know how the markets work. I know they fluctuate very quickly on those sort of markets. So it's probably the same for Rainmakers, which I know it's not playing FIFA or Madden out there, but it's the same kind of idea, right? They have a market for players that'll fluctuate based on their value, and I guess it works the same kind of way. All right, let's see if we have a prop board on Underdog. So that's enough talk about DFS. If you guys were just here for DFS, I appreciate the support as per usual. But for any of my prop guys, it looks like we don't have an Underdog board yet. So hopefully if we can stall a little bit here, we can get them to post that, because we do have a lot to talk about before we actually make slips. So there's a good chance that we will get a board by the time we get there. So in terms of props guys, let's go through the stats for round 3. Scoring average is about a quarter of a stroke over par. Birdie average is about 3.35 per round. Bogey average was 3.42 per round. So your elite tier players, right, are projecting for 3.5, 4 birdies based on their averages from today. And your elite tier players are projecting for closer to 2.5 to 3 bogeys per round. So it's always worth adjusting these averages, right, to account for the higher talent level. But honestly, these averages were very similar to days 1 through 3. So obviously the one real outlier was round 2, where it played slightly harder, right? We had a lower birdie average, a higher bogey average out there for round 2, but rounds 1 and 3 were almost identical when it came to the stat profile. So when you're going out there trying to find data to use to compare, I think rounds 1 and 3 are the stat averages that you should be considering. Green average was about 10 today. It was actually lower than I thought. I thought that the rain would make the average go up, but it actually went down compared to what we had in round 3, which is kind of mind-blowing considering all of the wind that they had out there. But yeah, we actually did have a lower green average. And then the fairway average went significantly up, which also kind of surprised me, to be honest. I thought it'd be about a 7 fairway average out there for round 3. But I guess with taking some of the lower tier players out of the field, cutting out the guys that are out of form right after the first 2 days, had an impact out there for fairways. But greens only being there at about a 10 green average was probably the most surprising thing that we've seen all golf tournament. So, and that was even after having that rain, which again, I thought would soften up the golf course. That's not really what we saw. And without rain overnight, no rain in the forecast for tomorrow, that average is probably going to go down a little bit. So when we get to our averages over here, you'll see that I think the scoring average is going to be pretty close to what we saw for today. So I have it between even par and 3/4 of a stroke over par. Birdie average, I have in that same sort of range as well. So between 3 and 3.5 per round. Bogey average between 3.25 and 3.5 per round. So that one I have narrowed down a little bit more, just with the consistency that we've seen this week. Green average, I have a little bit lower at 9.5 to 10, partially with the greens drying out a little bit. And then the fairway average, I think will be in that 7 to 7.5 range. Once again, it'll be drying out just a little bit right there overnight, with a whole other day to, evaporate that water, but it's not going to change very significantly. So once again, this round 3 average, I think is going to be super useful, right, to go out there and use for Sunday. But if we take these round 3 averages, average them out with what we saw for Thursday, out there for round 1, it gives us a pretty good idea of what to expect. So in terms of the weather, we'll circle back on that. If you guys are just joining us for this, weather looks almost identical to what we had for today. So winds in the 12 to maybe 15 mile an hour range for most of play. And then when it comes to your wind gusts, they're between like 18 to 25 miles an hour. So if you were watching play today, that's pretty much the exact kind of conditions that we got. The one difference, and this is much more important when it comes to props, so not so much for like fantasy, right? We really don't give a rat's ass about the direction that the wind is going. But for props, it matters, right? And the wind direction is back to what we saw for days 1 and 2 out there on Sunday. Today, it was a little bit wacky. It actually went the opposite direction that it typically does out there for moving day. And that made hole 1, which was one of the easier holes on site, days 1 through 2, play into the wind. Hole number 14 played into the wind. That one also played a little bit more difficult. And then hole number 5 and hole number 11 both played downwind. So today, 5 and 11 were a little bit easier than you had the first 2 days, but those are 2 of the harder par 5s on property. So you didn't really see a ton of birdies made at those holes anyways, right? Even with it playing downwind. And then 1 and 14, which days 1 and 2 were like absolutely destroyed. Both of them had like 0.4, 0.5 under par scoring averages, played into the wind. It didn't play as easy. So when we look at these, you'll still see that they played under par, right? Like 0.47, 0.48 under par, but they could have been even lower. The pin locations were super easy out there at holes number 1 and 11. And now that they're going to play downwind out here for Sunday, those holes are going to be absolutely destroyed. So obviously hole 5, hole number 14, the other par 5s, might play slightly harder out there for Sunday. And in fact, hole 5, right, played a hole 0.21 under today because of that wind direction. Days 1 and 2, it played over par, right? Like, look at this. 5 played 0.12 over par. Day 1, it played 0.02 over par. It's going to go back to that. But holes 1 in 14, right, that were super easy the first 2 days, you can see like 0.55 under, 0.32 under. Day 4 are going to play even easier. So all of that is to say, right, I know it's a lot of information right there, is to say that I think the birdie average might be higher on the par 5s. And that's going to, be important to go out there and note when we're potentially taking overs on birdies, because that wind direction is almost the exact opposite of what we had for today. So again, we're kind of trying to stall here to see if we can get a prop board posted over here in Underdog. But all of that is pertinent information. I guess we'll do a deep dive on pin locations to see if we can get a board posted. So this is my last ditch effort to go out here and stall a little bit more. But I already went through these pin locations before, so we won't spend a bunch of time here. But I will give you guys an idea of what we're working with. So yeah, if you're heading out of here, if you're only a fantasy guy, I appreciate the support here as usual. And of course, Steven, best of luck out there for Sunday. And yeah, the only thing I ask if you're heading out of here early, right, if you're not a prop person, is smash the like button for me, right? Go out there, get this out there to more people. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the content for next week. And hopefully your guys come through, right? I know a lot of you guys tail what I do for my exposure, which I appreciate and I don't take for granted, right? I'm not one of those cappers that I'll take that for granted. Let's go out there and cash some bets, right? We got the Svensson top 20 it is. Keith Mitchell top 10, I know it touted at the beginning of the week. Outright would be pretty nice for me. I got that one live at 50-1. But let's cash those. Let's potentially get a Cam Young outright. That'd be pretty sweet. And have ourselves a Sunday. But for my prop people, let's see if we can get a board posted. So hole number one, we're going to go through all the pins here. And it'll give me a chance to sip on this Crown and Coke too. So we'll stall a little bit. We'll get a board here at some point. And Prize Picks might post a board too. And again, I can't check Prize Picks here. So any of my prop people down there in chat, if you guys could check Prize Picks and see if there's a board posted, that would be super clutch. And if there is a board posted, I'll go about getting screenshots of the board from some of my buddies. I know that'll get them to me. So let me know down in chat if you guys see that Prize Picks board because I don't want to ask them for screenshots if it's not posted, right? I don't want to be too much of a nuisance out there. So hole number one's a par 5. It's, again, one of the easier holes that you have on the entire golf course. And it's tucked over here to the front right of the green. So if you go over here and bring up the overhead view of the green here, you'll see that it's over here towards the right side. It is by no means easier than what we had for today. This front pin location is by far the easiest that we'll get. But it is pretty comparable, I'd say, from the scoring perspective. So hole number one, I do think the wind direction will make it play even easier, but the pin location is pretty neutral, all things considered. Hole number two is a front left pin. This one is going to be a lot easier than what we had for today. And honestly, it's one of the few pin locations that does look like it's going to make the scoring average slightly lower than what we had for today's action. Hole number 3 is a back middle pin location. So it's going to play a little bit longer than what we had for today and does bring the pull miss into this bunker into play. Anything that's flared out into the wind, I'll end up missing in this bunker to the right. So definitely, I would say a higher scoring average than round 3. Hole 4 is a middle right pin location. It is a little bit harder than what you have here on the left side. And in general, I don't think it's going to have a massively higher scoring average, but will be slightly harder than what we had for today. Hole 5 is a middle left pin. So this is the super long par 5 up the hill. And this one will be playing into the wind tomorrow. So on top of playing just like 620 yards, you're going to have that aspect to worry about. And this pin location to the left side, which is close to this low area that you see over here in the middle left, it's not horrible. I'd say out of the bunkers, it's probably the easiest pin location to get up and down out of. But I mean, you're not going to see people reaching this green in 2. So you're still going to have to hit like a really good iron shot to go out there and get a birdie. And these bunker shots around the green, right, won't be for, getting up and down for birdie, right? There aren't going to be guys that are reaching this green in 2. So though the pin location is accessible, it's like at what cost? Like the guy is, it's not going to matter, right? I mean, sure, if you care about your guys getting up and down for par, it matters, but there's not going to be very many birdies at 5. You're going to have to earn a par, the par 5 birdie there. Hole 6 is a front right pin location. It is wide open. It's away from the bunkers. Kind of like we saw at hole number 2. It's one of the few pin locations that I do think is easier out there for tomorrow. Hole 7 is a back left pin. This one is just super hard, especially if you miss the fairway at 7. It's almost impossible to get to that back pin location. Hole number 8 is a back right pin. So they might move up the tee box here. They might not. If they move up the tee box, this one won't be as bad. But if it plays 240 yards, like it might, if they play the back pin location, it is going to be really tough. So we'll have to see what they do with the tee box at 8. But the pin location is absolutely devilish. Hole 9 is tucked over here on the left side. You have this little slope to worry about that can suck back shots. And if you end up hitting a pull shot over here to the left into the bunker, you have next to no chance of getting it up and down. So I don't know if it's like a brutal pin location, but it's definitely a little bit tricky because of the miss to the left. Hole 10 is a front pin, so this one will play shorter. I would say is one of the easier pin locations that we get. So out of these first 10 holes, right, we've had 3 that are easier, maybe 2 that are neutral, and then 5 that are more difficult. So definitely like your usual, Sunday, pin location setup where you're going to have a lot of harder pins. Hole number 11 is over here towards like the middle right, over here on top of the shelf. I would say that it's a pretty neutral pin. Not harder, not easier than what we had for today. Hole number 12 is like a middle pin location, slightly towards the back over here. It looks like it's a short hole right at 362, but you do have to lay up off the tee, leaving about a 200-yard shot in. So when you're hitting a 200-yard shot over here to this middle right location, it's not quite as straightforward as what it looks like on paper. So I know a lot of people see like sub 400-yard par 4 and go, oh, birdie luck. Not so much the case out there at 12. Hole 13 is a back right pin. This is like the hardest pin that you can possibly get. I mean, look at this guy. So hole 13 is like 200 yards. It's 204 yards, right? And this is the view from the tee box. You're hitting from way the fuck down here to a pin location that literally doesn't look like it's on the green. It'll be over here in this back corner. You have like 5 yards to work with in terms of your depth. And this slope over here to the right side. Now, if you just hit the green and roll it off, it'll just roll off into this fairway. If you hit the down slope over here, you'll see guys that bounce the whole way into the water. And of course, when it's in here in the back right, a lot of guys are just going to miss left, right? So they don't hit it into the water. And well, you're just going to hit it into the rough and bunker here, which are almost an impossible up and down. So hole 13 absolutely blows. That is going to be an extremely hard hole. Hole 14 is tucked over this left bunker. It's a longer par 5. This one won't be playing into the wind like it was today, so it should be a little bit easier because of that. But it is a tucked pin location, so it's not easy from that perspective. Hole 15 is a front right pin location. If they keep the tee box moved up, this one won't play very hard, right? Because it'll only be like 160 yards out there to that pin. But they moved up the tee box, a whole tee box today. So if they play it from the back like they probably will, it'll be like a 210-yard hole to this front pin location. And if you guys know anything about front pin locations with long irons, they're normally extremely difficult to get close to. So that one will really depend on where they put the tee box. But if they play the back tee there, it'll be absolutely brutal. 16 is another back right pin location, another just comically hard pin, especially on one of the harder holes on the golf course. In fact, the hardest hole out of all 18 holes. Hole 17 is a front pin. So, if they keep the tee box moved up, this isn't that bad, right? They had it in a similar location, actually, out there for round 3. But just like hole 15, right? They moved up the tee box. And on Sunday, it's highly unlikely that they move up the tee box. So, though it's in the same kind of spot, and I think today it played slightly under par. Actually, 17 actually still played slightly over par, right? Even with that tee box moved up. Tomorrow, it's going to play way over par, right? If it plays to its full distance. And then finally, 18 is a back left pin location. So this one is probably the hardest pin that you have on this hole. It's way over here. You have this little slope that'll take shots into the rough. It's a real tough 2-putt from over here on the front right. And is also going to play a little bit longer. So again, going through the pins, I think there were 4 that were easier out of the 18. There were maybe like 4 that were neutral. And then 10 of the pin locations, right, which is well over half of them, are what I'd consider near brutal pin locations. So this scoring average, right, that's why I have it slightly worse than what we saw for today, even with the same kind of weather. It's also why I think that the bogey average might be slightly higher, right? Green average slightly lower than what we had for round 3. Is because the pin locations are going to have something to say about it. So weather, I think, will be very consistent outside of that wind direction out there for Sunday. But this pin setup is definitely going to have an impact as well. Let's see if Underdog finally got their shit together and posted a board. God damn it. Doesn't look like they have. Maybe Prize Picks has. Nope. Looks like no Prize Picks board either. So all right, I guess we'll talk a game plan out there for props. But if not, guys, you'll have to check them out on the Patreon page. I'll be posting all the props clips that I take over there as per usual. But in terms of what I want to do here, so using our averages, using our projections, right, are probably going to be the best way to go about this. If we get anyone I'd consider to be an elite tier birdie maker posted at 3 or 3.5 birdies, they're going to be a clear over because, if I'm expecting the birdie average to be between 3 and 3.5 for the field, an elite tier birdie maker that gains routinely like a half a stroke to the field, right, is projecting for closer to 4 birdies per round. So that's something that I'll be keeping an eye on, right, is whether we can get some value on a potential birdie prop. Bogey props, I'll be looking at overs. So if we can get any players at 2.5 or 3 bogeys that are, let's say, bottom half bogey avoiders in the field, I'll probably be looking some overs on bogeys. Greens and fairways, we'll have to see if there's any like just crazy projections we can take advantage of. But birdie overs, I think that there could be some value if we can find an elite tier player. But I think my favorite props of all are probably going to be these bogey overs. If we can get just even like an average player at like a 3 bogey projection, especially maybe one of those guys in contention that isn't as experienced as some of the other players, that feels like a good spot to get to. So that'll be the strategy in general, right? They're going to have bogey props over there in Underdog for sure. On Prize Picks, today we did have some value over there on Prize Picks that we could take for birdies. That's probably where we're going to find a few guys at 3 birdies. Underdog had like most of the field at 3.5 birdies out there for round 3. Prize Picks had them down at like 2.5, 3. So it feels like if we're going to get solid birdie lines, it'll probably be on the Prize Picks side. And of course, because Prize Picks doesn't always post those bogey props, we'll probably be able to find that bogey value over there in Underdog. So I post this prop report over there on my Patreon for my members. I post all the different slips that I'm entering both on both sites, right? Prize Picks and Underdog over there as well. Since we don't have a board posted, and I did my best to try and linger here as long as possible, we're probably going to have to leave it to that. So unless we do have a Prize Picks board, I'm going to see if I can bring up my VPN real quick and see what we got. We're probably going to end the live stream here. So let me double check. Nope, nothing on Prize Picks yet. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and end the live stream. I appreciate all the support here as per usual, guys. And let's go out there and have ourselves a Sunday. It would be super sweet to get a Keith win or a Cam Young win. And I guess now that we have an Adam Hadman outright, would be pretty sweet if he went out there and won himself too. But best of luck out there with your exposure, guys. Next week, we got the Valero Texas Open. Also, a live golf event down in Miami. So I don't know if that's sorry, it's not next weekend. That's the week after next weekend. So I'll be at the live golf event down in Miami 2 weekends from now. And next week, of course, we'll be going over all the content for the Valero Texas Open. So what is it, Houston Open, the week that we have that live golf event too. We'll be covering all of that before the Masters. So looking forward to it. Should be an absolutely epic Sunday, and might be out there on the golf course myself. So if you're watching the coverage out there tomorrow, keep an eye out for your boy, and may you go out there and cash all of those.